Moving right along, we now have ARIN Policy 2014-16, Section 4.10, Austerity Policy Update. And I see Dan coming up, so it must be Dan.
It is me. Okay, the text of this can be found in page 16 of the discussion guide, so I was going to avoid going through all the details of the policy and kind of talk about this at a high level rather quickly to try and make up a little time. Mainly because the feedback that we got from the PPC earlier this week was also pretty clear. There was conversations in Chicago and a lot of discussion about whether or not the ARIN region should have an austerity policy to ensure new entrants for a long time after the free pool ran out would have blocks. So this proposal was given to the ACA as an attempt to do that. One of the first steps or approaches that it took was to try and replace the transition technology section of Section 410, which basically had blocks set aside to ensure for the deployment of NAT and other transition technologies into the future. The feedback that we got at the last meeting was that that wasn't a good idea. A lot of people liked the transition technology section that's in place and should be left alone. So the rewrite of this was to leave that section intact and simply add an austerity section to that in addition. And in order to fund that, it was going to take some space from the block that was reserved for the transition technologies. The feedback that we've gotten from there is that that's not a good idea either, that people think the block that is reserved should remain. So the question becomes whether or not, one, this proposal is even something that the community wants, and or whether this may just be a situation that gets overtaken by events, since if there's no way to supply IPs for this pool, is there a point to it? So what we're looking for, what the AC is looking for, is some direction on whether or not we should continue to work on this, and if we should, where would that address space come from if you really wanted an austerity policy? Back mic, Mr. Bloomberg. Kevin.
Kevin Bloomberg, The Wire, NAC. I support abandonment of this policy. Initially, I thought this was a great idea. The other regions have austerity policies. We should do something similar. Let's look out for the small guy. And then I realized we do have an austerity policy. The community said, hey, you want to get some V4 space? Get some V6. That's what our community has said, and I am a firm believer of that. I've put in a subsequent policy that will show up sometime whenever on the list, which deals with a routing technical issue, which is 28s are useless for new entrants if they want to be able to actually kickstart their network with V6, and changed it to 24 just across the board. But that's a different issue. I firmly believe that once we run out in the free pool, if you want to use what's left in the free pool out of a dedicated pool, then to put it colloquially, man up and get V6.
Front mic.
Matt Petak, Yahoo. I would just like to echo Mr. DeLong's comments. That ship has sailed. Well, let's get on the V6 boat. The transition technology block is great for that little bit you need to tide you over, but that should be the only purpose for it. I do not support this proposal.
Thank you.
Microphones remain open. Anyone else want to give some feedback to this? I am closing the microphones.
Message received.
Queues are closed. Okay, thank you. One remote.
Marla Azinger, Frontier Communications. I don't support as written. That said, please correct me if one of my interpretations you are about to hear from me is wrong. First, I'd like to point out this policy shouldn't be expected to be used a lot yet. This is a forward-thinking policy. If it were getting used a lot right now, I would seriously be wondering what is going on with request reviews. Second, what is happening to that /11 that is removed, and why is that being removed? I don't agree with just adding it to the free pool, so basically one specific company of a certain size now can get a /11. Leave it alone and let it show how the other changes have an effect for a couple of years before you go yanking half of the available space away. Third and last, I want to draw attention to the fact that this doesn't just tweak 4.10, but it changes it completely. This removes access to these IPs to anyone other than a Virgin company with no affiliates. Currently, it's open basically to anyone needing space for transition technology. That said, I do support this part of the proposal change.
To answer her question, the intent was the austerity policy put in place the mechanism so new entrants after the free pool depletion could continue to get small blocks. Where that space would come from, it was suggested that the /10 that's reserved for transition technologies would be split in half, and an 11 would continue to be reserved for the transition technologies, and the other 11 would supply the pool for these austerity allocations going on in the future.